We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Badenock.
Mr. Speaker, can I also wish everyone a happy St George's Day? And can I also associate myself with remarks about the passing of His Holiness Pope Francis on Easter Monday? Being married to a Catholic, I know the profound loss for millions in Britain and across the world. Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister now accept that when he said that it was the law that trans women were women, he was wrong?
Well, Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. I welcome the Supreme Court ruling on this issue. It brings clarity and it will give confidence to women and, of course, to service providers. The Equality and Human Rights Commission will now issue updated guidance, and it's important that that happens and that all service providers then act accordingly. This government's approach and my approach has been as follows: to support and implement the Supreme Court ruling, and we will; to continue to protect single-sex spaces based on biological sex, and we will; but also to ensure that trans people are treated with respect, and we will; and to ensure that everybody is given dignity in their everyday lives. I do think this is the time now to lower the temperature, to move forward and to conduct this debate with the care and compassion that it deserves, and I think that should unite the whole House.
Mr. Speaker, he can't bring himself to admit that he was wrong. That was the question. But he spoke about respect and dignity and compassion and lowering the temperature. So will he now apologise to the member for Canterbury, the very brave member for Canterbury, for hounding her out of the Labour Party simply for telling the truth?
Mr. Speaker, I've always approached this on the basis that we should treat everyone with dignity and respect, whatever their different views, and I'll continue to do so. And I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, for why. Because when we lose sight of that approach and make this a political football, as happened in the past, then we end up with the spectacle of a decent man, and he was a decent man, the previous Prime Minister, diminishing himself at this dispatch box by making trans jokes whilst the mother of a murdered trans teenager watched from the public gallery just up there. That will never be my approach. My approach will be to support the ruling, to protect single-sex spaces and treat everybody with dignity and respect. And I believe there's a consensus in this House and the country for that approach.
Mr. Speaker, there is no apology for the member for Canterbury. There is no taking of responsibility. He talks about political football. He practically kicked her out of his party. Constructive dismissal. Constructive dismissal. He talks about my predecessor. What about the abuse I faced from his MPs calling me a transphobe for supporting what the Supreme Court has now clarified in his words? And where was he? He hid for 6 days without commenting on the Supreme Court judgment. Why did it take him so long to respond? Isn't it because he was scared?
Mr. Speaker, the only fiction here is the idea she delivered anything in office. She held the post of Minister for Women and Equalities for 2 years, and she did precisely nothing. She provided no clarity on the law, did nothing to improve women's lives, which got materially worse under her watch. They talk, for example, about hospitals and mixed-sex wards, uphill and down-dale. What happened in the last decade? The use of mixed-sex wards in our NHS rose by 2,000%. And there's a pattern of behaviour here. Women and Equalities Minister failed to do anything for women. The Trade Minister, who failed to get a trade deal with the US. The Business Minister, who failed to get a deal with British Steel. She's a spectator, not a leader.
Mr. Speaker, I will tell him what I did. I stopped the gender... I will. Yes. When his Labour leader in Scotland was whipping his MSPs to get male rapists into women's prisons, I stopped that gender recognition bill. I helped commission the Cass review. I replaced the guidance on single-sex toilets. I made sure that the puberty blockers issue was resolved while he was sitting there cheering on the ideology that was taking away safe spaces. And when the Prime Minister stayed silent last week, presumably waiting for what Morgan McSweeney thinks. On his WhatsApp groups, some of his closest ministers were plotting to overturn the Supreme Court decision. Labour MP after Labour MP stood up yesterday and challenged the ruling. How can we take his government seriously on this?
Well, I think the WhatsApp group you should be worried about is the one of his shadow Justice Secretary. And Mr. Speaker, the mask has slipped just 1 week before the elections because the shadow Justice Secretary is not here. A man who's doing everything he can to replace her. The man that most of them want as leader of their party has admitted that Reform and the Tories are working together. He said, I want this fight to be united. He said he's determined to bring this coalition, he calls it, together one way or another. Well, I think we know what that means. Every Tory voter is appalled at the thought of paying for the NHS. Every Reform voter who hates what the Tories did the last 14 years, they're not Conservatives, they're a con.
Who's playing political football now? He's got no answers, Mr. Speaker. He's got no answers. Yesterday, Labour MP after Labour MP challenged the ruling. He should be more worried about his backbenchers than my frontbenchers. His Labour ministers called the chair of the Equality and Human Rights Commission appalling. Baroness Faulkner's role is critical to enforcing the court's judgment. She has had to put up with relentless abuse, not just from his front bench, but from activists and ideologues. Reappointing her will be a clear sign that he is taking this issue seriously. So will he commit to reappointing Baroness Faulkner when her term expires this year?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've always said the debate should be conducted properly on the principle of debate. I've said it many, many times. But I would remind the Leader of the Opposition that when they were in government, violence against women and girls reached record highs, rape prosecutions fell to record lows, and millions of women were left stuck on NHS waiting lists, unable to get the health care that they needed. Under this Labour government, NHS waiting lists down by more than 200,000, domestic abuse specialists in 999 control rooms. We've strengthened access to maternity pay, something she calls excessive. She talks about political footballs, but a coalition between Reform and the Tories being formed behind her back, we know what that means when the Shadow Justice Secretary and the member for Clacton cook up their joint manifesto. NHS charging a pro-Russia foreign policy, end to workers' rights. Just as the Love government lost control of the economy, the borders and health, in 6 short months, she's lost control of her party.
Mr. Speaker, he's clearly so uncomfortable talking about this subject. Yes. This is a choice between a Conservative party that stood up for common sense and a Labour party that bent the knee to every passing fad. This is a question about moral courage, Mr. Speaker, about doing the right thing even when it is difficult. And the truth is, he doesn't have the balls. The Prime Minister only tells people what they want to hear. He only tells people what they want to hear. He is a weather vane who twists in the wind. He cheered an ideology that denied safe spaces to women and girls because he thought it was cool to do so. He hounded a brave female MP out of his party for telling the truth he accepts now. And now he is hiding behind the Supreme Court judgment. And isn't that because he doesn't know what he actually believes?
I can only assume that sounded better when she did it in the mirror earlier on. But the truth is, it doesn't really matter what the Leader of the Opposition says, because nobody believes, none of them, that she's going to lead them into the next election anyway. It's going to be the Shadow Justice Secretary. He's away plotting, that's why he's not here today, Mr. Speaker. And the member for Clacton fighting over the bones of the Tory party. And they think Reform are going to give them their votes without changing their policy. Absolutely no way. The member for Clacton's going to do what he always does, eat the Tory party for breakfast.